Human saves alien woman's stolen bag, unknowingly helping the judge who will decide his fate. Ryan Fletcher hated the rain. It wasn't just that it was wet or cold. It was the weight of it, the relentless drumbeat of water slamming against his jacket, soaking through the fabric until he could feel the chill creep into his bones. There was no escaping it here, on Nebulan Prime, where the storm had turned the bustling streets into rivers of neon and puddles. The city's weather control grid was usually pretty reliable, but tonight it seemed to be malfunctioning, as if the sky itself had decided to drown the streets in sheets of water. Ryan adjusted his collar, the high-tech fabric struggling to keep the rain at bay. He kept his pace steady, his boots slapping against the pavement as he navigated through the crowd. The usual flow of people dodging raindrops had turned the city into a blur of umbrellas, hoods, and the distant hum of hovering vehicles above. Despite the city's size, he felt alone in the storm. His past as a cargo pilot had left him with a distrust of crowds, and these crowded streets only reminded him how isolated he was. Yet, something about the wet concrete under his boots, the city's lights bouncing off the water, made him feel alive. Maybe it was the old pilot instinct kicking in. He'd flown across dozens of planets, seen 100 different worlds, but he was tired of all that. Nebulan Prime was supposed to be his fresh start, a simple life, no more surprises. He was wrong. Then he heard it. A scream, high-pitched, desperate, and unmistakable. It cut through the noise of the storm like a knife, drawing his attention instantly. His hand instinctively went to his side, where a weapon might have been if he was still on duty. But there was no weapon, just him and the storm. Ryan's eyes darted toward the sound. Just ahead, a figure was sprinting through the crowd, a hooded thief, his movements quick and fluid. The man had something clutched tightly to his chest, a bag, and the woman behind him was shouting, her voice drowned by the rain, but unmistakable in its panic. Ryan's instincts kicked in before his brain could catch up. The thief's path was clear, but he wasn't about to let this happen. His body moved without hesitation, cutting through the crowd, shoulder first, knocking pedestrians aside. The thief was running fast, but Ryan was faster. His old pilot legs were made for more than just cargo runs. They were made for moments like this. As he closed in, the thief glanced over his shoulder, eyes flashing with panic. Ryan's heart pounded as he pushed forward, never losing focus. The thief made a sharp turn into a narrow alley, thinking he could shake him off. It was a mistake. Ryan was already there. The alley was a dead end, blocked by a towering waste disposal unit. The thief skidded to a stop, his eyes frantic as he realized he had nowhere to go. Ryan walked toward him slowly, deliberately. His boots splashed through the deepening puddles as he closed the gap. The rain was heavier now, drumming against the walls of the alley, but Ryan's gaze was locked on the thief. "Hand it over," Ryan said, his voice even, not a trace of anger. He was no stranger to confrontation, but something about this situation felt different. He wasn't just chasing a thief, he was chasing a moment of fate. "You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The thief hissed something in a language Ryan didn't understand, the translation device in his ear scrambling to catch it. The next thing Ryan knew, a small blade shimmered in the thief's hand, the sharp edge catching the dim light of the alley. With a sharp twist of his wrist, Ryan dodged the strike, feeling the rush of adrenaline that always came with a fight. The thief was fast, but Ryan was faster, sidestepping the blade and grabbing the man's arm. In one fluid motion, he twisted the thief's wrist, hearing the satisfying crack of bones shifting just enough to force a scream from him. He slammed him against the alley wall, pinning him there, his grip firm and unyielding. Hand in over. His voice was low, controlled. The thief's bag dropped to the wet concrete with a soft thud. For a moment, everything was silent, the rain the only sound as Ryan released the thief.
The thief scrambled to his feet and with a yelp made a desperate leap over the waste unit. He disappeared into the shadows of the city, leaving Ryan standing there in the rain. Ryan didn't chase him. He wasn't here for a fight. He was here for the bag. He picked it up, brushing the wet droplets off the surface. His fingers brushed the sleek fabric of the bag as he stood, still not fully processing what had just happened. The adrenaline was already fading, replaced by something else, a sense of something important unfolding, something he couldn't quite grasp. Looking up, he saw her. She was standing beneath the overhang of a nearby building, her posture straight and professional, despite the rain that plastered her snow-white hair against her face. The bag in her hands was the same one the thief had stolen. Her gray eyes, flecked with turquoise, locked onto his. For a brief moment, their gazes met. The world seemed to slow. Ryan felt a strange pull, like gravity was shifting. He walked toward her, the bag extended in his hand. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, his voice softer now. He could feel the tension in the air, but he couldn't explain why. Her fingers brushed his as she took the bag. For a brief moment, the touch felt like an electric shock, quick and sharp, but undeniable. "Thank you," she said, her voice a melody that seemed to echo in Ryan's ears. Most wouldn't have bothered. Ryan glanced down, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Most haven't seen what happens when people stop bothering. Her eyes softened for a moment. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Fletcher." "Ryan Fletcher," he corrected, offering his hand. She hesitated just for a beat before shaking it. Her skin was cool, but not unpleasant. "I must be on my way," she said, her tone still polite but distant. "Late for an appointment, but truly thank you." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. Ryan stood there for a moment, watching her go, feeling an odd sense of disappointment. The moment had ended as quickly as it had started. The rain continued to fall in sheets around him, but Ryan didn't mind it as much now. The storm outside matched the one brewing inside. He didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to become entangled, and it would be a war neither of them were prepared for. The courtroom. The sound of heavy boots on the polished stone floors echoed through the austere hall of Nebulon Prime's Central Justice Complex. Ryan Fletcher stood in the center of the grand courtroom, his hands shackled, his mind racing. The walls around him seemed to loom higher with each passing second, the gleaming metal and marble surfaces only amplifying the sense of isolation. He was no longer a free man, he was a defendant, accused of something he didn't do. Ryan Fletcher, a robotic voice from the overhead speaker called him, snapping him back to reality. His name echoed in the cavernous room. "You stand accused of grand theft of a Class A hover vehicle, a crime punishable by up to 10 years of forced labor." The words landed like a punch, the weight of them sinking deep into his gut. He had barely time to process what was happening when two large Nebulon security officers flanked him, their dark eyes scanning the courtroom like predators watching their prey. The officer to his left, a hulking figure with greenish scales and sharp angular features, was the first to speak. "Not much of a criminal, are you, human?" the officer muttered in an almost mocking tone. Ryan didn't respond. He knew better than to waste his breath. His eyes were locked straight ahead, but his mind was running 1,000 miles per hour. The charge was absurd. He didn't even know how to operate a Class A hover vehicle, let alone steal it. He'd been walking home through the rain, minding his business, when this mess had all started. A soft click sounded, and Ryan's eyes flicked to the side. A short, spindly alien with orange skin and 4 fingers raised a data tablet. The alien, clearly uninterested in Ryan's fate, merely glanced at the screen before turning back to the courtroom with a bored expression. "The evidence against Mr. Fletcher is clear," the alien said with a dismissive wave of his hand. The vehicle's tracking system shows that it was at his residence for over 3 hours last evening. Additionally, security cameras captured a figure matching his build operating the vehicle, and DNA traces have been found on the controls. Ryan clenched his jaw. This was getting worse by the second. They were framing him. There was no way he could have been involved in the theft. The rainstorm had kept him on Sector 7's main thoroughfare, where anyone who saw him walking home could confirm his alibi. But no one had mentioned that in court. Eyewitness testimony? That was worthless in Nebulan courts. Everyone knew that. "This is ridiculous," Ryan muttered under his breath, glaring at his so-called court-appointed advocate, Prell, a disinterested alien with what appeared to be permanent frown lines etched across his face. Prell was too busy tapping away at his tablet to care about Ryan's case. Before Ryan could protest further, the large, imposing double doors at the back of the courtroom swang open. The room fell silent as
Ryan blinked, confused. "Help you? With what exactly?" Anara walked over to a desk, pulling a small device from a drawer. She slid it across the table toward him. It was a data crystal. Nothing unusual at first glance, but the way she handed it to him made the hairs on the back of Ryan's neck stand up. This was important. She didn't want him to just take it. She needed him to understand. "I've been gathering evidence," she said, her voice low. "Evidence of a conspiracy against non-Nebulan citizens. What they've been doing to humans here, it's not just wrong, it's a systematic attack on everything we're trying to change." Ryan's eyes narrowed. He knew this was bigger than just protecting her. "What kind of conspiracy?" Anara's lips tightened. "The Purity Council. They want to expel all non-Nebulans, especially humans, from the planet, and they've been using the judicial system to do it. Fabricated evidence, false charges. Every case is part of a larger plan." She paused, her gaze hardening. "And they've been using people like my father to further their cause." Ryan's mind raced. He had known something was off since the moment he had been framed for a crime he didn't commit. But this was something else, something much darker. "We have to stop them," Anara said, her voice a whisper, but one that carried all the weight of the galaxy. "And I need your help, Ryan." Ryan felt the gravity of her words settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about protecting her anymore. This was about survival, about stopping a war before it tore the planet apart. Without a word, Ryan nodded. "I'm in." Anara's eyes flickered with something, relief perhaps, or recognition, but she didn't say a word. Instead, she turned toward the desk, opening a compartment that Ryan hadn't noticed before. From it, she pulled out a map of Nebulan Prime, marked with several locations. "This is where it begins," she said quietly, "and this is where we end it." Ryan took the map, his gaze never leaving hers. Whatever was coming, he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The hidden truth. The city of Nebulan Prime sprawled beneath them, an endless sea of lights, each flickering like a star that had been forced into submission by the relentless pace of life. Inside Anara Nix's high-rise apartment, the quiet hum of the city was replaced by the tension that hung in the air. Ryan sat at the edge of a sleek, minimalist chair, his eyes glued to the data crystal that Anara had handed him only moments ago. The room felt cold, despite the warmth of the decor, luxurious but distant, as if it had been designed for someone who needed to keep the world at arm's length. Anara stood across the room, her back to him, gazing out at the rain-drenched skyline. Her figure was silhouetted by the soft glow of the city lights, the storm outside casting erratic shadows across her profile. Ryan didn't know what to think. Her revelation that there was a conspiracy against humans, a systematic effort to drive non-Nebulans off the planet, was heavier than he had anticipated. He had always known there were tensions between the different species on Nebulan Prime, but this was war. He ran his fingers over the cool surface of the data crystal, the weight of it in his palm a constant reminder of what was at stake. The evidence Anara had gathered was damning: recordings, financial records, security footage. Every piece of the puzzle fit into the larger picture of corruption, of power, of control.
and as much as he hated to admit it, he was now part of it. "You've seen the files." Anara's voice cut through the silence, her tone surprisingly calm, though it was clear there was an underlying fire in it. "You know what's at stake." Ryan finally broke his silence. "You aren't kidding when you said this was bigger than anything I've ever dealt with." His voice was steady, but inside his mind was a storm of questions and doubts. How did it get this far? Why hasn't anyone done something before? Anara's lips tightened, and for a moment her eyes hardened. "Because no one has dared." She crossed the room slowly, her every movement measured, calculated, like a predator moving in for the kill. "The Purity Council is deeply embedded in every branch of the government. They've made sure that anyone who tries to expose them is either silenced or discredited." Ryan stood, the sudden urge to pace wash over him. "So you've been gathering this evidence for months, risking everything, and you still don't have enough to take them down?" Anara's lips tightened, and for a moment her eyes hardened. "No," she said softly, almost to herself. "Not enough." She reached out to the table, tapping a few buttons on a holographic interface, and the walls around them lit up with the display of several key locations around Nebulon Prime. The Purity Council's influence stretched into every corner of the city. Some of the most powerful beings on the planet were embedded within it, controlling everything from the legal system to the economy. "Their power is undeniable," Anara said, her voice laced with frustration. "And they're not just targeting humans, they're erasing anyone who doesn't conform to their idea of what Nebulon society should be." Ryan's eyes narrowed as he studied the locations on the display. Underground meetings, black market dealings, even secret judicial hearings. It was like watching a chessboard of the most dangerous game he could imagine. "So what's the next step?" Ryan asked, his voice steady, but his gut twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "How do we stop them?" Anara didn't immediately answer. Instead, she moved to the window, looking out over the city as the rain pattered against the glass. "I've been working alone for months," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't trust anyone, not even my father, until I knew the full scope of what I was up against." Ryan looked at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Your father? He doesn't know what you've been doing?" Anara turned to him, her eyes cold but resigned. "No, he's too close to the political world. He works with the very people I'm trying to expose. He would never understand why I'm doing this. He would never risk everything for the truth." Ryan absorbed her words, his mind working through the implications. Theron Nix, Anara's father, had already made it clear that he was playing a different game, one that prioritized power and influence. But now, as the pieces fell into place, Ryan realized just how much Anara had been sacrificing. She had been operating in the shadows, gathering evidence, making allies, at the risk of losing everything. "And you're right," Anara said, her voice hardening. "I need help. Real help. I need people who are willing to risk everything, people who understand what's at stake." Ryan's stomach tightened. The weight of her words settled over him. She wasn't asking him to just protect her anymore. She was asking him to join her in a war that neither of them could afford to lose. He met her gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. There was no going back now. "We'll need a plan," Ryan said, the words coming out more solidly than he expected. "And we'll need backup. This isn't something we can just walk into." Anara's eyes flickered with something, relief perhaps, or recognition, but she didn't say a word. Instead, she turned toward the desk, opening a compartment that Ryan hadn't noticed before. From it, she pulled out a map of Nebulon Prime, marked with several locations. "This is where it begins," she said quietly, "and this is where we end it." Ryan took the map, his gaze never leaving hers. Whatever was coming, he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The hidden truth. The city of Nebulon Prime sprawled beneath them, an endless sea of lights, each flickering like a star that had been forced into submission by the relentless pace of life. Inside Anara Nix's high-rise apartment, the quiet hum of the city was replaced by the tension that hung in the air. Ryan sat at the edge of a sleek, minimalist chair, his eyes glued to the data crystal that Anara had handed him only moments ago. The room felt cold, despite the warmth of the decor, luxurious but distant, as if it had been designed for someone who needed to keep the world at arm's length. Anara stood across the room, her back to him, gazing out at the rain-drenched skyline. Her figure was silhouetted by the soft glow of the city lights, the storm outside casting erratic shadows across her profile. Ryan didn't know what to think. Her revelation that there was a conspiracy against humans, a systematic effort to drive non-Nebulans off the planet, was heavier than he had anticipated. He had always known there were tensions between the different species on Nebulan Prime, but this was war. He ran his fingers over the cool surface of the data crystal, the weight of it in his palm a constant reminder of what was at stake. The evidence Anara had gathered was damning. Recordings, financial records, security footage. Every piece of the puzzle fit into the larger picture of corruption, of power, of control. And as much as he hated to admit it, he was now part of it. "You've seen the files." Anara's voice cut through the silence, her tone surprisingly calm, though it was clear there was an underlying fire in it. "You know what's at stake." Ryan finally broke his silence. "You weren't kidding when you said this was bigger than anything I've ever dealt with." His voice was steady, but inside his mind was a storm of questions and doubts. How did it get this far? Why hasn't anyone done something before? Anara's lips tightened, and for a moment her eyes hardened. "Because no one has dared." She crossed the room slowly, her every movement measured, calculated, like a predator moving in for the kill. "The Purity Council is deeply embedded in every branch of the government. They've made sure that anyone who tries to expose them is either silenced or discredited." Ryan stood, the sudden urge to pace wash over him. "So you've been gathering this evidence for months, risking everything, and you still don't have enough to take them